Hi, Soph.
Hi, Jules. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
So, some things I really would like to know about you, what your take is. If you had unlimited budget, what would your dream eatery look like? Where would it be? What would you be serving?
Okay. If we're talking about the interior of the restaurant, I think something that's understated but luxurious. I think restaurants that are too themey stress me out because I think they're not timeless. They don't stand the test of time. Like in Auckland, I think Kingi is a really beautiful example where the restaurant isn't the main event, but it feels lovely being in there. And I think that's what Nat Cheshire is really clever at. I mean, if we're talking any location in the world, dining by the water is very nice. Yeah, by a beach.
Yeah. And what kind of food would you be serving?
I grew up with a lot of Italian food, so I think anyone that knows me knows that I'd say pasta would be available. I think anything that's cooked really beautifully and balanced well is what I think I'm becoming more and more fussy about. So things that have a really good balance of vegetables and saltiness and sweetness and acidity. So also anything conducive to a good time.
Yeah.
Not too formal.
Yeah, nice. I'd like to dine there. One day on your
Yeah,
list,
girl.
maybe? Yeah.
Let's do it.
You're working front of house hospo. What's in your apron?
Okay. I am not a big notepad person. When I take orders, I like to look at the person. I think I remember what they're saying by looking at their face, but always good to have a pen for a backup, particularly if it's a more fancy restaurant because you need to know which seats everyone's in. A lighter, because the birthday candles always blow out as you're walking towards the table. A lip gloss, perhaps. I think that's about it.
I always wonder when you're in a restaurant and there's a big group and they can just memorize your whole order. I'm like, that is like, how do people do that? I'm like, that to me, I'm like, that's an art.
I look at the person's face and I remember what they ordered. So then when I go to input the order at the till, I remember that's what she's having. Because then to me, that's their experience. But I think that the issue with heaps of tech that's around now is they're not actually listening to you. They're just busy pushing buttons. So then they say, do you mind if I repeat your order? And you're like, oh, you could have just listened the first time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Can you please talk us through your death row meal?
Okay. Is this entree, main, dessert?
Whatever.
Let's do all the things.
You're about to...
I'm going to
see you later.
Island.
Yeah.
I'm going to have something fresh and light to start. So probably, let's say, a raw fish tostada.
Yum.
Or half a dozen oysters, just with mignonette. I'm going to have a bowl of pasta next. Or a beautifully cooked steak. But probably a bowl of pasta. Oh yeah, let's have both. And there'll be a green salad on the table with a very nice dressing on it. Dessert. I'm not much of a dessert gal, but I would always have a spoonful of tiramisu. So that could be it. Or a cocktail. I like an after dinner cocktail.
Yeah. Or a pre-death cocktail.
Yeah.
If you could cook for someone, dead or alive, who would it be?
The person I thought of when you said that is Anthony Bourdain, because he's kind of a food hero of mine.
Amazing. Hi, Soph, who are you and what do you do?
Hello, my name is Sophie Gilmour and I do all sorts of food things. So I'm a part owner of Fatima's in Auckland. We have 3 venues. I am a hospitality consultant. I have a business called Delicious Business. I have a co-working space called The Village, and I'm involved in a couple of food charities. One's called Everybody Eats and one's called DineAid.
Bit on.
Yeah.
Many hats.
Yeah.
And how are you doing right now? And I would love the long version, please.
Right now, I am good. I feel lucky for most of my life. I've got quite an even temperament and my moods are quite consistent. So I tend to wake up and feel good most of the time, which I don't take for granted. I'm definitely feeling under pressure at the moment, like I know lots of people are, with work, with family, with finances, and I think balancing those things. But I also find it quite easy to access gratitude, and I've got lots to be grateful for, so that kind of balances it out.
Yeah,
So I'm
nice.
good.
Great. And what's front of mind for you right now across anything business? Just, yeah, what's your main focus?
Front of mind. I think we're in a really strange time at the moment, and I think there is a lot to contend with. So you've got lunatics like Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. You've got a war in Gaza. On a bad day, it feels like the world's burning. But I actually think it's really important to balance that with all the things that are going well, and there's loads of reason to be hopeful, and a lot of progress has been made as well. So I think what's front of mind for me is not getting too swept up in the news or the media, and trying to kind of zoom out and have a more balanced perspective, and also think about the impact that I can have in my life and in New Zealand.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, it feels like we're waiting for like a revolution or something.
Yes,
Like,
yeah. I mean,
something needs to burn and something great has to happen.
yeah, a few people have said to me lately, like, surely we're not supposed to be living like this, you know? It's like, particularly I've found in the bigger cities where people are under financial pressure, you've got kind of two people in a household working full time, whilst you've got kids that are under 5, so you've got to go to work to pay for the daycare to keep the wheels turning, and that involves a bunch of balancing and juggling and pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, I sometimes feel like, yeah, things are happening in the wrong way. Sometimes I'm like, I'm going to work to pay for daycare so that I can work. And I'm like, is that right?
Well, I think life's all a bit backwards. Like my mum said to me the other day that she was feeling bored at the weekend. I was like, I would bloody kill to be bored. It's been a long time, you
Yeah,
know?
since
I
you've
feel
sat
like
there
I'm treading water and,
Yeah.
you know, always a little bit behind and trying to catch up, and there's this big pile of stuff to do. And then, you know, you get to her age and they get to be, I think that's what's interesting about watching grandparents, is that they're almost more present than they were when children. But you know, there's other positive things about your kids seeing you busy and working too. So
Yeah.
I don't know who's
Yeah,
doing
absolutely.
it right.
Yeah. Can you please walk us through your career journey from start to finish? Like where it all began. You've done a lot. You continue to do a lot. Yeah, so I'd love to hear a bit more around where you started and where you've got to, and how you got to where you've got to.
Sure. I worked in hospitality throughout school. So I think when I was 16 or 17 was my first hospitality job. So I was raised in a household that hospitality is kind of in our blood, and we were raised by a village. So a lot of that was around food and wine and people coming over and enjoying the bringing together of people that does. So for me, it was kind of a natural first thing to go and work in a restaurant, and I loved it. There's a little bit of a magic I feel when I'm in that space, and that was kind of ignited then. So I did that as my sort of university job and went to study in Dunedin. I worked in cocktail bars and cafes while I was down there as well. I studied law and politics and got a job somehow at one of the top law firms when I left university, and really enjoyed that. I did that for 3 years. I had actually finished my law degree and my politics degree in Europe, so I got to whiz around the world then, doing a bit of travelling on a shoestring, come back to Auckland and then feel like I was ready to start a career. So that was really lucky, and I enjoyed the socialising aspect on reflection more than I enjoyed the law. So I put that to myself as a bit of a challenge. About 3 years in, I thought, do I love this, or do I just like being the president of the social committee and organising all the parties? And in order for me to understand that, I basically had to go and do a different role in law. So I moved from working in commercial litigation to being a young barrister. So a junior barrister in a chambers that's on Shortland Street called Shortland Chambers. I it was really academic. It was really challenging. I think I grew up I did quite well at school. I did pretty well at university. I was never top of the class, but I think I'd really been told that I was super clever. And that job definitely pushed me to my academic limits. It started to feel a bit uncomfortable. And actually, a few friends and I had started Bird on a Wire while I was doing that. So that was sort of something we focused on in the evening, or I don't know, we probably thought it was going to be like a passive income, which is just laughable now. But Bird on a Wire got to a point where somebody had to jump in, and I had established by that point that being in that really academic environment that was quite insular wasn't compatible with me, and so I put my hand up and said, I'll tap out. So off with the law gown and on with the old chicken apron. And I really felt from the first day that I did that I was doing the right thing, nice. Which is interesting because obviously financially and for a bunch of other reasons it maybe wouldn't have looked like the right thing, but that business taught me loads and I really loved it, and it was a really crucial time in my life, like those formative years of 23 to 28, 29. And we worked our butts off and we had all of the experiences, both good and bad, basically, that you can have. We made heaps of mistakes. We learned heaps of lessons. And that actually culminated in a successful sale of that business. So we sold Bird on a Wire in 2018 to the coffee club company. And they're really great guys, came to us, loved the brand, and off it went. So then there was this kind of what do I do next career moment. And people said to me, just pause and see what comes up, and sometimes it's not till you close one door that another door opens. And so I did. I actually went to culinary school in Ireland, which is sort of part of my career, but it was almost like a recovery, like a rehab after all of the, stress and anxiety and ups and downs of a business. And it was also in that beautiful window before I had children. So able to take the time for myself, and I'll always be grateful that I did that. So before I left for Ireland, I'd started Delicious Business, which is a hospitality consultancy. And that was set up with the idea of, we learned all these lessons and quite a lot of them the hard way. How could we be helpful to other people to save them the time, save them the mistakes? And the hospitality industry is something that we're really proud to be part of. So Camille, who was my business partner at Bird on a Wire, came into Delicious Business with me, and then Leisha Jones, who's a really clever journalist and food writer, and that was that. And I guess on the side, I'm the lead trustee on a charity called the DineAid Charitable Trust, and that was from my time at Bird on a Wire. It's when you go to a restaurant at Christmas time and there's $2 added to your bill or a dish. And Bird on a Wire had really outperformed our category. Like the top 10 for the country was sort of like the French Cafe, Siddart, all the top restaurants, and then Bird on a Wire. And I think it was because I was really taken by the concept and the ability to use your business as a vehicle for good. So the businesses just collect the money from the punters, and 100% of that money goes to the city mission. And I had also actually sat down with my friend Nick Loosely, who was starting Everybody Eats, during the Bird on a Wire time, and helped him with the setting up of the strategy for that organisation and a bit of a plan to get it started. So now I still have Delicious Business, and I do everything from interviewing and hosting events to activations for big brands to helping individual hospitality businesses and cafes. And I'm on the board of Everybody Eats, which has been a really awesome education around governance and kind of spurred me on to doing the Institute of Directors, Company Directors course. And DineAid is something that I still run. It's a Christmas time campaign, so that's really lovely thing for me to take part in. That's annual and really just takes time at one time of the year. And lastly, in COVID, I started a co-working space with some friends. We wanted to basically provide a workspace that was more flexible than what was there. So co-working had just started, but we were starting to have children and didn't want to commit to a $50 day pass to go to a place when we'd only really be able to be there for 3 or 4 hours anyway. And all of this kind of led to the idea that why does every co-working space look the same? And it was basically that they'd all been designed by men for men. And what about the fact that being in a beautiful villa or surrounded by clever, inspiring women or men, it's not a female-only space, but that a lot of colour really influences your mood and the way that you work, productivity-wise as well. So the village opened right in the middle of COVID lockdown, and we're about 4 years in now. Sorry, long career story.
That's huge, and you've done so many things. How, because you grew up, as you say, in a family, and you always hosted, and your mum was very involved in the Auckland hospitality scene. How much of an influence do you think she was in you going and working in hospitality when you were younger? Did she kind of advocate that, or did you see what she did and how much she enjoyed it, and that kind of inspired you to want to give it a go?
I'm not sure, to be honest. My first job at Chibo, which was a fine dining restaurant then, was actually through my boyfriend at the time, Ben, that was working there. I think my mum would have encouraged me because she already had us. She was cracking that whip, and we were doing dishes and clearing tables. And right from when I was young, I'd go and stay at people's houses, and they'd just say, God, she is the most amazing guest. Whereas I just thought that when the big people were finished eating, the little people stand up and do all the dishes. So I think she'd already trained me, and then it was an obvious next step. So she probably said, go and do it. And I think you hear over and over again the value of having worked in hospitality and how it contributes to other parts of your life. So I'm really glad that I did. Yeah,
amazing. And then, so transitioning from studying law to becoming a hospitality guru, that's quite the leap. Mm-hmm. And you kind of, I guess, talked about it a little bit, but what really motivated that change for you to buy a chicken shop? How did that come about? And can you just tell us a bit about Bird on a Wire?
Yeah. So Bird on a Wire was born out of a desire for a bunch of young 20-somethings, I think, to contribute something to the neighbourhood. We were all living in flats. That was when you could afford to flat on Franklin Road. And we had all worked in restaurants. So it was at the time, my current boyfriend, who's now my husband, my ex-boyfriend, and my current boyfriend's cousin. So it was a close-knit group, and we all decided, a flatmate saw a Trade Me listing of a really well-known burger and fish and chip joint called Nina's Takeaways, and the idea was floated, which I think when you're young and naive, those are actually useful things for starting a business. So that was probably what it was born out of, was it can't be that hard, let's do it. And Ben was my business partner, is a big thinker, and he's ambitious, and so am I. And so it doesn't take much for one to egg the other one on to think, let's give it a crack. And we had a bunch of experience working front of house fine dining, but that's it. So buying Bird on a Wire was potentially about us doing something creative. We had, at the time, been spending quite a bit of time in Sydney. Our siblings actually lived together, and they went to this place in Sydney called Char Grilled Charlie's, which is a really low-key but quite beautiful chicken shop with loads of salads. And it was really normal at that time for Australians to be outsourcing their dinner. But in New Zealand, takeaways were still kind of like a guilty pleasure. Like, people would have Indian takeaways and feel bad about it. And it was about us trying to say, you're busy, we totally get it, and why don't you have something fresh that you didn't have time to cook yourself? They're doing it in Sydney, let's do it here too. So I think that was our motivation.
And the sale of Bird on a Wire was a very successful one. We would call you the chicken millionaire.
Yeah, for a hot second.
And in the best way. But how did the sale of that, was that did that change your life in any way? What did that enable you to be able to do after you closed the sale of Bird on a Wire?
That's really interesting because what I think is when you believe that you're under pressure, you have a whole different variety of stories you tell yourself about why that is. So it's work. It's work. I'm under pressure because of work, or I'm under pressure because I need money. So it's financial, or I'm under pressure because my relationship's not going well, or the children are stressing me out, or whatever it is. And I do actually think that those are kind of stories you tell yourself. My experience is that the money came in from the sale of Bird on a Wire. And I mean, to be clear, it wasn't multi-millions of dollars, but it allowed us, me in particular, because my husband David was a school teacher, to take some time and take some pressure off. And I think that I had imagined I would go and buy a bunch of stuff, and I actually didn't. It just kind of stayed there, and I went to cooking school. I did things that are, on reflection, more compatible with my personality, so experiences, and I love treating people that I love. And I just remember the Sydney trip with my mum and my sister, and Mimi is like putting on these Fendi glasses, and I was like, you like them, you have them. Like, it was just really fun, and like going to lots of restaurants and a lot of things that fill me up. But what I would say is that it doesn't really change the way that you operate in any significant way. It's just that it feels like that when you're under financial pressure. So what it gave me was time. I do think it gave me a second to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I made the decision that I wanted to work for myself again, which I think comes with a load of positives. So flexibility, the ability to be a decision maker in your own kind of destiny. But as you know, that always comes also with a lot of pressures and a lot of downsides. And I think those of us that are business owners are feeling it most right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. And when you transitioned from law into hospitality, what did your parents think, and how did you manage that expectation with your family?
My family, my parents, have never been overly involved in what I did with myself academically or in my career. And I'm not sure if that's because I was kind of quite conscientious, like I was a bit of a geek. I remember now, like my husband's a school teacher, and I remember how seriously I took my 7th form exams. And to me, it just seems hilarious now. But I think I already had that kind of conscientiousness myself. So if you ask my mum what I studied, like she'd know I have a law degree, but she wouldn't know that I did politics and French probably, or she wouldn't have said, yes, you should do this, or no, you shouldn't do that. But I do remember her being reasonably mortified when I said I'm giving up law and I'm going to work at Bird on a Wire. And I think that's the traditional view, is that you are better to do something that is going to be reliable. And that's kind of the ideology that comes down from the generations that have been through recessions like we're going through at the moment, right? And wars. So like, do the thing that will provide a stable, secure income, and you will always be okay. And so I remember her saying, well, what about other types of law, darling? Like, you've only done commercial law, and maybe you might like to do family law. And there was a family friend who was, he's now a High Court judge, actually, Simon Moore, and he said to me, I think you'd be a fantastic criminal lawyer or a family lawyer, like something where there's a jury and you can really, like, you know, advocate, rather than commercial, which was getting super academic, and basically there's no substitute for the facts, and the smartest guy in the room will normally win. So it's not, there's no fun. And I actually think that that's probably like one of my core values, is like, I'm such an extrovert and I'm such a people person that ultimately the decision was made out of me kind of losing my shit and getting anxious, but not knowing what anxiety was because no one talked about it then. And eventually I said to my mum, I hate this. And she went, oh God, if you hate it, then leave if you hate it. So ultimately supportive.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and then you're like, okay, bye, I'm going to go work in a chicken shop.
Yeah, see ya.
See you later. What helps, because you do so many things, wear so many hats, you've got multiple business, you sit on boards, you're very generous with your time with your friends. I know that personally because you've helped me, and you're a mum. So what, I guess, keeps you motivated and inspired to keep up with all your different roles and responsibilities? Because there's so many things going on. There's life, there's, a lot. So, it's Monday morning and you wake up and some people dread getting out of bed, but are you like, yes, cool, because you've got so much on? Like, is that motivating you? Does that motivate you to have a really busy schedule throughout the week? What keeps you really motivated, or is your work just a source of motivation in itself? You don't really need anything. It's just you get up and you're happy and good to go.
That's interesting. I know I have quite a strong work ethic, and my sister does as well. So that points towards us being raised to understand that. I think you're lucky to have lots of opportunities, and we've been educated, which is lucky, and it was instilled in us that we have an obligation to contribute to the people around us, the community around us, and then the wider community. So for me, I think I don't have any jobs that I dread. Everybody has parts of their job that they don't like, but stepping away from law and stepping into something that feels much more aligned with who I am means that I don't hate my job. I also don't think I have the expectation that life is easy, and I don't have a problem with hard things. So I sometimes think, am I a bit of a battler or like a bit of a masochist? Because I really like doing hard things. I like the satisfaction that I get at the end of that. So I think that builds resilience. So more than waking up and leaping out the door every day, I commit to what I'm going to do, and then I always do that. I always follow through, and I think that when you get to the end of whatever it is you're trying to achieve, there's almost nothing better than the satisfaction of having stuck it out despite the ups and downs.
Yeah.
I think that's probably more what motivates me.
Yeah, nice. And then having held leadership roles in various industries, what are some key leadership principles or strategies that you found to be universally effective?
Leadership's interesting because I don't think everyone's a born leader, but I don't think leadership is either for you or not for you. So some people have to put more work and more effort into becoming a better leader than others. I think whenever I do one of those personality tests, my personality type is that one that's like makes everything into a party and sells the dream and takes everyone along with me. So that means that I've kind of naturally been put in leadership positions a lot, and I'm comfortable with that. I'm not like a out the front building my own personal brand in it for the glory type person. I'm quite happy sitting behind or being part of a team. I really like doing things in teams, and I don't think want to do anything on my own in my career. But I think that leadership, your strategy, or your style of leadership is something that you can only really learn by doing it, which is the stumbling block for a lot of people. So you have to be a leader in order to know what feels right for you. And I always say to young people that I'm talking to, think about the best manager you ever had or the worst manager you ever had, and what do you want to be and what don't you want to be? Because I think if it doesn't feel natural to you, it's super obvious, and it also isn't sustainable. Like, you can't be like, oh, my leadership style is to just treat everyone like family. And then if you don't go and do that, then it's not going to come naturally to you. It's not going to stack up, and it's not going to succeed.
Yeah.
So there has to be an element of like your personality becomes a leadership style in some way. But I think as I've got older, I'm much less I'm definitely not a control freak. I don't like micromanaging because I'm quite bad with detail. I would much rather surround myself with clever people or give people like the rope to make their own decisions and mistakes, and take responsibility for that. And then the buck stops with me if something goes wrong. So I'm like hugely about being responsible for what happens in my businesses. That is on me at the end of the day. But within that, I'm not that keen to hyper fixate on the specifics. I just think if we're all going to the same destination, I don't mind how you get there.
Yeah, nice. And I think there's a lot of people that just get lumped in that boat because of wherever you are at work. If you work in a corporate place, you can just be lumped with being like a manager of some department.
Totally.
And you can be good at your job, but you may not be good at managing people.
Yeah, and the higher up the
people.
chain you go, the less on the tools you are doing the thing that you love or that you're really good at, and the more people you get given to manage. And the training that you got for the skill is kind of lost because you don't get any training on how to manage the people. Yeah,
and then you throw in the complexity of dealing with so many different people and personalities, and like that's such a challenge. And when it is your own business, you're the owner of the business and you've got staff, there's another layer of complexity because you can't just tell someone off and like you're working so closely with them. So that is definitely a challenge. I mean, for me personally, but I know for other people.
Really challenging. I think the difference between there's leadership and then there's management. Like people management is like a whole. I almost think there should be like a little degree that you get in that, you know, because that's such a big part of how, even if you're a good leader, your business can survive or thrive. So if it's not you, then, you know, hire people that are great leaders, managers.
That's what HR teams are for, right? But when you're like little owner operator.
So,
I am HR.
Yeah.
Doing a rubbish job of it. So just looping back to Bird on a Wire, what are your biggest learnings from selling a business? I guess, like, why did you decide to sell Bird on a Wire?
That was a case of the business being at a point in its journey where the founders wanted different things out of it. So we all had a different idea of scale that we were after. So Ben has always been a global thinker, and so his desire, I guess, was to take the business globally. And we did a pop-up in China, and it's really cool. But then Camille, who was at the other end, loved that we were doing a beautiful job of keeping the quality really high, which is really challenging with loads of scale. So I think her preference would have been to keep it boutique and keep it local. And then I was probably somewhere in the middle. But to be honest, the bigger the business gets, the less of the things that you love as the owner you get to do sometimes. And so we decided, should we put an IM together and see what we can get for the business? And we'd actually just put in some really hard yards, paid for a bunch of coaching, implemented a whole lot of systems. And so the timing was right. And I think that's another lesson, is that there's this Boston Consulting Group have like this matrix, but you really want to sell a business when it's on its way up. So it's got to either be like a rising star or a cash cow, I think, because then it becomes a dog and you've got to like reinvent it to get it back up. So yeah, I would never say that the success of that sale was because of us and who we are as individuals in silo. I think it's a combination of the timing, the financials we put a lot of work in, the lessons that we'd learned, the mistakes that we'd made, and all of that ended up in something that was successful.
Yeah, great. And when it comes to the hospitality industry, it's like very demanding and sometimes more risk than reward, especially at the moment, what we're hearing about restaurants closing, which is devastating. So what keeps you in there, and have you ever thought of leaving and maybe going back to law or doing something completely different?
Yes to both of those things. There is something that I find addictive about hospitality. So I think I will always have a foot in that game. So whether that's through DineAid, whether that's through consulting or owning or operating my own business, I don't really see my life without some hospitality involvement. But at this stage of my life, being in the operations is not that compatible. I've got 2 small children under 5, and you've got 55 staff at Fatima's, for example. Most of them are under 25, which is quite a challenging bunch to manage. and people management in general takes up a lot of effort and energy. So the best thing that I did there was hire an operations manager who's younger than me, much closer to their age, is the right person for that job. And I think that's a challenge, is at what stage of your life is it compatible with doing the thing that you love? So hospitality for me, right now, operations, not the one.
Yeah.
But I think there's always benefit in being involved in something that kind of lights your fire. And that's how I feel about hospitality.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so you're in. You're staying. Do you still work front of house at all? And is there an element of that you miss or still do to this day?
Oh, yeah. I love working front of house. Like, if I could just stand at Fatima's and roll pitas and serve shawarmas all day and pour beers, I would. It's the best. That is for me, the thing about hospitality that I love. It's the people, it's the opportunity to make someone's day. It's the ability to work in a team. It teaches, you can see the people around you starting to flourish as they get better at their job. There's so many things about it that I love. But yeah, not realistic for me at the moment to be on the floor, not the best use of my time. Business ownership, as you know, has become super admin heavy. Like, we're expected to be employment law experts, immigration experts, HR experts. You've got to run the actual company. You've got financials to deal with. So as the owner of the business, I think hospitality is a very low margin game. So it makes you hone in on the mechanics of what makes that work. And to be honest, I spend more of my time on that than on the floor.
And to business owners, maybe specifically hospitality, but also any kind of business owner that owner operated, do you see that as something that's really important to be front and centre because personally for me, I still check our customer service, I'll check our Instagram, I'll reply to people, as I find that's the best way to get feedback, to be able to ask the questions, which there's so much value in that. And I think people can undervalue that because you're right, you get caught up with doing so many other things. But just hearing you saying you love being front of house because you can help make someone's day, but do you also find value in that because you do get to speak and get first-hand feedback from customers?
Yes, I think you're really good at that. I think Fatima's, I think hospitality in general could be much better at it. You get real-time feedback when you're a waitress, for example, like when I'm giving epic service and I can make the people in my section have a beautiful night. Like, I know what that feels like. But in terms of seeking and like iterating or testing new things, I think it's quite hard in hospitality because there's a lot of it. So we have stores, we have online sales, we have social media platforms, we get emails. So I've always really admired how you manage that really well with listening to all the customers and what they're saying. And what's also really important is, I think, is not to imagine that you are the target customer and behave that way, because often you're not, and maybe you're not anymore, but you once were. So getting the feedback from the people that are the target customer is much more important than your personal opinion. And I think, we should be more like two islands on that front.
Well, yeah, because you can get stuck in your own echo chamber and think, just because I like it this way, the way that it can be done. So I think it can kind of bring you back down to reality sometimes when you hear something, you're like, okay, yeah, maybe I need to be doing that differently.
Well, and also I think you know what you're an expert at. So you have done a really good job of staying the course on, like, when I think of Two Islands, I think of products that actually work. Like effectiveness is like one of your drivers. For me, it's flavour, and I could take feedback from every man and his dog, and sometimes I think people don't actually know what they want, and so you really need to listen to people, but you also need to stay the course. You have a strategy that you owe to your business to stick to, and you can feel it when businesses are flip-flopping all over the place, or they're literally just chasing a dollar and they don't have that like underlying confidence in who they are and what they're doing. I think that's a detriment as well for a business.
Yeah, and I think especially when it comes to anything food, it's so subjective.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, like you can take someone's feedback and just thank you.
Yeah.
Because you know that you're never going to be able to please everyone. But I think if you're pleasing the masses,
Yes.
like you're doing a good job.
Yes.
So do you find it difficult to relax now when you do go and dine out? Like what are the top 3 make or break things that you notice when you step into a restaurant?
Shit, no, I don't find it hard to relax in restaurants. It's like my absolute happy place. It's almost like I go into a restaurant and everything else around me goes quiet.
Yeah, nice.
I think it's a combination of things that make an experience. Let's say atmosphere is one. So I'm particular about lighting and music. Those are the kinds of things that when they're right, you don't even notice them. But when they're wrong, it can be quite distracting. I was in a restaurant recently and the lighting was super bright and it just made me want to get the hell out of there. So I think that's one thing, is the atmosphere. The food is really important to me. I think not everybody is super living to eat like I am. Lots of people just want to have a nice time, and so you can get away with the food being less excellent if the atmosphere is awesome. And service is another one, which unfortunately, because hospitality is not such a profession in New Zealand, I think that's the thing that we experience the least here. But really amazing service can almost excuse anything when it's right. When the waiter, I used to, at Chibo, is really known for its great service, and I used to be able to guess what someone was ordering before they even ordered it. Yeah, and wow. You can anticipate what they want and make it happen and surprise them. And I think there's a real magic in that. And that's what I get when I go to Sydney, or when you're traveling and you go have those kind of inspirational experiences. Often they've got all 3 right, which is the food, the atmosphere, and the service. But yeah, I think 2 out of 3 and you're good.
Who do you think does a really good job in Auckland or New Zealand that gets all those 3 things right, and that where do you absolutely love dining just because they tick all those boxes?
I love service that's got a bit of personality. So that really involves reading the room, and I think tailoring your service to the table is what you can tell. Like if you can tell someone knows that you're a bit cheeky, or you're having a big night, or you're a bit this way or that way, then you appreciate it, and there's like a vibe and a bit of a dance between you and who's serving you. I think Mark Warbank and his service style, he was actually also trained at Chibo, reason, as a consistently good experience. The music is always fab, the decor is lit. The food, Shay's food is beautiful. So I think that they do a really lovely job of it being consistently reliable. I think the answer to why Prego in Auckland is an institution, not being a fancy restaurant, but is the service is particular, it's attentive and it's professional. And combine that with really nice food and an environment that's nothing sexy, but, I think really is special. It makes people feel special, it puts them at ease, and then that makes them want to come back.
Yeah, you can go in your activewear and or you can go dressed up fancy. You fit in there.
Yeah, totally.
What's your biggest takeaway from culinary school when you went to Ireland, and what advice would you offer to young people just starting out in the hospitality industry?
The culinary school I went to was it's not on an organic farm, and it was almost like the church of Mother Nature, and that sounds really cheesy, but it was all about appreciating produce for what it is. And what that means is, I guess it starts with the soil, and then it becomes a beautiful food, and then treating that with care. So they did a lot of things that really sparked the nerd in me about the chemistry of food. So kind of that salt, fat, acid, heat thing. Like, you cannot really skip out on time. It's kind of the magic ingredient in a lot of recipes. And so I think the culture now with like the 15-minute meals and, getting things done as quickly as possible means that the end result sometimes doesn't give the credit to the ingredients that it deserves. So that would be it for me. Obviously, we don't all have time during the week, for example, but I think giving cooking time means that you get the best end result and also you feel the best about it.
And how long were you over there for?
I was only there for 6 weeks. It was a live-in course. So we lived on the farm in like group houses, and you had to be like in your whites, ready to go at 9 o'clock every morning to cook. And you had to write out your plan and present your meal. And at lunchtime, everyone would sit down together and enjoy each other's food. And then in the afternoon, we would sit down and watch the demo for what we were going to cook the next day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really cool. And I think, look, advice I would give a young person going into hospitality, if they're starting a business, I think there's no other way around it than it's really hard work. It is a low margin business, but the flip of that is that it makes you an expert in low margin businesses and the mechanics. Like if you can't manage it, if you're not measuring it, you can't manage it.
Yeah.
And so hospitality really makes you zone in on your food cost and your labor cost. So the cost of goods category in a much bigger, more profitable business might be jumping around a bit more, and that would be okay because there's more room to move, whereas we have to really manage everything. But yeah, so it's hard work, but I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. And now coming to motherhood, so you're a mother of 2. Your career and family life is a balancing act, and I know people say that often, and it's like, well, what is balance? But like, how do you balance that? Because you've got so much on, and you've got your little girls. So like, what tricks have you learned along the way to help, I guess, keep you going and somewhat level-headed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see a lot of women around me doing it really well, and I think that in itself is really being in good company, counts for something. I think that for me, wellness is kind of wholeness. So I am an extroverted person that basically my anti-anxiety is social interaction of any kind. So it could be like a big night on the margaritas with you, or it could be a walk with a friend, or it could be a great phone call and a catch up. But I would rather in a stressful time keep things balanced than hone in on one aspect of my life and go, I'm not working, I'm going to stay at home only, or I'm going to go to ground and work on this project and not see anyone, because for me that doesn't keep me in equilibrium. It's a little bit of everything. So I try and still make sure that if I'm tired or I'm busy, I fit in social activities. If I say I'm going to do something, I always show up and do it, even though I'm busy, because then you have something to feel good about that balances you. And I think you never regret doing a balance of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I always admire how you can have a big night and then the next day you're going to yoga in the morning.
Yeah, and exercise, super important, right? I'm realistic at the moment that I have 2 young children and that takes up most of my mornings. So I make sure that I do a 5K walk with the baby in the pram 3 days a week. But I'm also listening to a great podcast that's keeping me kind of like educated and inspired at the same time. And then I go to Pilates or I go to bar, but I don't put pressure on myself to go 7 days a week, because I think if you're doing that, then something has got to give. Whereas if you have a bit of everything in moderation approach like me, then, my expectations of myself are not too high, which means that I'm not letting myself down all the time. It's kind of like a way of being kind to yourself.
Otherwise, if you put too many expectations, you set yourself up for disappointment. So I think that's a really lovely approach, and that's how I also try and do things, and knowing that not every day will work out how you think it might work out because you get a call from daycare and you've got to pick up your child because they're sick, or a staff member's sick and you've got to go show up at the restaurant. So allowing that flex, like in your mind, to know that things can change is a really good way to approach things instead of just trying to be so rigid.
Yes, yeah, I think that the people that I know, or the women in my lives that are more control freaky or more perfectionist than I am, struggle with that more than me, because I'm never doing things perfectly. My mum says I'm always a day late and $1 short. But I like to think that when I do deliver, I over deliver, and I kind of believe in doing the 10% extra. So if I come back to you, it's because I've spent 2 days thinking about it and I've drafted something that is considered, rather than a one-line email and moving on. So it goes both ways. And it's like everything's nuanced. It's not the same for everyone. And moderation is my thing.
Yeah, nice. And being a mother, has it changed how you are as a business owner or as a leader? Do you lead differently? Have you noticed a change in yourself? Are you more empathetic because you understand when people get sick? Or how, pre-kids you can, if you hear someone being sick, you're like, oh, suck it up. But has that kind of softened you a little bit in certain areas?
Probably not in that way. It's quite interesting because I don't actually think that being a mother has changed the way that I operate or lead in the workplace. It's definitely made me more conscious of the way that I raise my girls. I think my mum was strict and had high expectations of us, and I actually feel grateful for that. And I guess I'm pushing up against, or I'm coming up against, the gentle parenting a lot now, and I'm thinking, well, are we ever going to get anything done if we're all just on their level on the floor the whole time asking them how they feel? So I don't know, maybe I'm a boomer. But I think one thing that I'm doing a lot of, obviously, is parenting at home. So I feel less inclined to want to do that in the workplace. I want people to figure out how we're going to do the thing and come to me if they need me or if there's a problem, and I will be there if it goes wrong, but I don't want to be in each other's lanes. I'm driven by efficiency, probably more than I was before.
Yeah, parent at home, but not in the workplace.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if your daughters wanted to follow in your footsteps and pursue a career in hospitality and business, what would be your biggest piece of advice for them?
I think if they wanted to be in hospitality because they loved hospitality, then I would say do that. I would say figure out a way that you're not giving up your potential. So for me, I think being across the financials of any business is important, and we've learned that lesson over and over again. So I think I would say if you're going to be in hospitality, then learn how to run the business and understand that. Maybe I'd say go and do some other study first, or see what it is about the business that makes you tick and try and stay close to that. I would also say that hard things are good for you. So I would say do hard things and experience what it feels like when you get to the end of it, because I think that's hugely satisfying.
Yeah, so satisfying. And Mimi, your sister, so she's been with you obviously from the beginning of your journey. I'm sure you've got her on speed dial. She's one of the first people you call when anything happens in your life, the good and the bad. How crucial has her support been in shaping both your life and your career, because you work in a similar industry?
Yeah, Mimi and I are really different, and I think that's really valuable. So she is a super creative, big thinker, sort of more marketing minded, more artistic than me, more creative than me. I am much more logical and linear, and she's kind of circular and creative. So I think as a combination, when we bounce ideas off each other, that's really valuable. I don't know how it would go actually working together. We haven't done that. But I think there is a lot of overlap, and we have valuable input to give to each other. So in terms of being able to call her or ask her a question, it's been really valuable for me, and she's a total go-getter. So it's nice to be surrounded by people that are ambitious and aspirational and giving it a go, even though it can be tough out there.
And you're both mums. How do you now work together, because you've both got kids and you both run your own businesses? How are you there as like support for each other, because you're always hanging out on the weekends, looking after each other's children? Has that brought you guys closer? From the outside looking in, it's such a special relationship that you have, and so lovely that you can support each other in your personal life and also in your business life. So yes, since becoming mums, has that brought you guys closer together?
I think she was looking forward to me having children, because basically I was just running around having the best time ever. Like, I just filled up all of my time with fun, and she thought she's going to go down. And we actually had a really great run with Odette, our first daughter. Was super easy until she turned 3. And so having a second child, I think, has probably made me recognise more what Mimi's dealing with. She has a special needs child, which is mind-blowingly comprehensive in terms of what it requires emotionally, logistically, from a health perspective. And it's every time I spend time with her, I'm reminded that that's more than I even understand. So I have a huge respect for taking that on and then taking on all the other things that she does as well. And we both are quite prone to taking a lot on. But I think that that's in order to live balanced lives where we still feel like we're contributing to what's around us. And we slept in the same bed till Mimi was 10 and I was about 8, and I think she got too cool for me. But I think that was quite an important aspect of our childhood. Like, we have a real sister relationship. We're not the best mates that are out together all the time, but it's a really unconditional, super supportive relationship that you can ask something of the other and they're happy to do it. And so we do share the load with childcare, and that's been really helpful and really wonderful to see our little girls who are best mates now too.
Yeah, very special. And do you like to take time out for yourself? I know you love a facial. Like, what does that look like? And like, how do you squeeze that in between your other workload? Because sometimes that can get put to the side, right? When you're a mum, the kids come first. So what's like your one thing that you just absolutely love doing to take time out for yourself?
I hate to say it, but I think watching reality TV is like it's like I want to do something where I switch my brain off. I also listen to a couple of quite gossipy podcasts where it's just mates bantering. Like, what I need is like levity and humour. I really value humour. So anything that I find funny or light-hearted, I think I'm drawn to in my downtime. I'm useless with all that body maintenance stuff, like getting my hair done, getting my nails done, getting my facials, eyebrows. Like, if I could just not have to do any of that, that would be great, because I don't find it that relaxing. I know some people do, but and it is a form of self-love. Like, feeling good, I think, is an important part of that is looking good. And so when I do make the effort, I always feel kind of rewarded for it. But like you say, you've got to pick your battles. And I sort of like to lie in bed and watch Love is Blind at the end of the night, and I think I'm winning.
Brilliant. Have you ever hit breaking point, and like, how do you get yourself out of it, and like, how do you stay motivated?
The closest I have come to breaking point would be in my early 20s when I was working as a junior barrister, and I didn't know what anxiety was. I thought I was going crazy. So ultimately, I think I was reaching kind of the edges of my academic capabilities, perhaps. I think perhaps I was like starving myself of the interaction that my extroverted personality needed. there's a bunch of different ways you could say it, right? Like I was super out of alignment, and for me that manifested in quite severe anxiety. And because I'm so even, it really threw me, and the emotion that was kind of associated with it was overwhelm. And then I think the way that manifested was tearfulness. So I just start crying, which is totally off brand for me. I have like really, really available happy tears, but not sad tears. And I was just like crying all the time, every time something went wrong. So it's like, you know, when your baseline of adrenaline's too high and just anything can tip you over the edge. I think I was just at that point. So a nice time probably for it to happen, like in my early 20s. And I spent probably 6 months trying to figure out what would bring that level down for me. And at first I did all the like yoga and green smoothies and time on your own. And I'd just be in yoga, like forgetting to breathe. And it just didn't work for me. And then being super healthy, because I'm already quite healthy, didn't make me feel any different. So I'm like, should I be motivated to be drinking all these green smoothies when I could just keep doing what I was doing before? Long story short, that was how I figured out what balances me. And I think it's a real case of investing in my relationships, investing in I've got a really stable, beautiful marriage, and I think that makes a really big difference to me. And work, a bit of everything, something to feel good about. Something unpaid work is equally important to me as paid work. My friendships, my relationship, I need a bit of all of it.
Yeah, and that's nice. And sometimes that can be something that can just come with age, right?
Yeah.
Because when you are younger, you're questioning. Whereas if something like that happened now, you would know how to deal with that.
Yeah, and the anxiety's okay. It's not.
Yeah.
You don't need to avoid it at all costs. You just need to recognize it for what it is, and then put whatever your fix is in place to get it to a level where you can perform and it's managed, and then this too shall pass. It always does.
Yeah, great. And who's been the largest influence on yourself as a person in regards to your career, marriage, and being a mother? Because you've got so many wonderful people in your life who you're so close to, but who's been that like one person, if there is one?
I think my mother. I think the older you get, the more you realise what a huge privilege and gift it is to have been really well mothered.
Yeah.
So it's making me emotional. I feel really lucky to have had, I have a wonderful mother who really understands me and supports me, and the same with my sister. And it's had an enormous impact in my life.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm crying. Woo!
And if you could go back and tell 18-year-old Sophie one thing, what would you say to her?
I mean, she had a pretty good old time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think one thing that is bizarre and seems to apply even more to girls than boys for some weird reason is financial education. Like, apparently what you do is just absorb your parents' attitude to money. And then in my family, my parents had quite different attitudes to money, and so their money was a bit of a source of disagreement. So what I would say is try and learn about it, like learn how it works, like the stuff that the girls at the Curve are doing, all of that. My husband's a school teacher of high school girls, and I think financial literacy for your life is something that I would love to be better at.
Yeah, amazing.